I was scrolling through the web the other morning and came across these 3 headlines within the span of 20 minutes. Let me show you. Trump's tariffs push Europe closer to China, from Bloomberg. Why Trump's tariffs won't push China and Europe closer, from CNBC. Europe must choose between America and China, from the Financial Times. To be honest, I felt a bit pity for Europe to be described in this way, as if it's some kind of a pawn on a chessboard, moved around solely at somebody else's discretion. It shouldn't be that way. I can get why people have that kind of impression about Europe. Between about 2017 and 2024, Europe has been following the US's leads on security and economic strategies towards China quite closely. On the Ukraine conflict, they basically synced their rhetoric. And what that has resulted in is that every time when European leaders visit China, or when there are public disagreements between Europe and the United States, pundits would say, oh, Europe is moving away from the US, or China is getting Europe. This time it's different. In one of my previous videos, I said that Europe is stepping out of America's shadow, and a new Europe is gradually taking shape. What has happened over the past couple of weeks is a very clear demonstration of this process.
The European Union is retaliating with its own countermeasures against the United States.
The EU is now putting tariffs on about $24 billion worth of US exports into the EU.
The EU and China have agreed to look into setting minimum prices for Chinese-made electric vehicles.
We believe it is necessary to continue making progress in establishing solid relations between China and the European Union.
The differences that exist today between Europe and the US over Ukraine, as well as the tariffs, are not just policy differences. These are differences over fundamental views towards security, the economy, and the international system. So this is where this relationship is at. The United States blames Europe for being overly dependent on it. Europe is realizing that it's being overly dependent on it as well. Following that chess analogy, both the player and the pawn want to change. This is where China comes in. In a recent phone call with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said, the EU and China are committed to upholding the fair and free multilateral trading system with the WTO at its core, and safeguarding the sound and steady development of global economic and trade relations, which serves the common interests of both sides and the world at large. She also emphasized the European side is willing to promote high-level dialogue with China in various fields and deepen mutually beneficial cooperation in such fields as the economy, trade, the green economy, and climate change. You see here, the economy, trade, green economy, and climate change. Von der Leyen has spelled out clearly where China and the EU share common interests or have similar views. There's no political alignment out of ideology or shared values. There's a recognition, at least from the European side, that there are areas, mainly the economy and the environment, where China and Europe can make progress as the US goes haywire. As a Chinese, do I want Europe and China to be closer? Of course I do. China has always said that it supports Europe in finding its strategic autonomy. But being autonomous means making decisions that prioritize the Europeans' interests, not the Chinese, nor the Americans, but the Europeans. No one is expecting Europe to swing wildly to China or treat China as if it's the US. It's unrealistic. For the past several years, I think everybody has learned a lesson that's costing Europe a huge sum to pay for, that being overly dependent on anyone is not a wise long-term strategy. French President Emmanuel Macron said several years ago that Europe should not become a vassal state. So perhaps it's time for people to stop speculating which side Europe is going to belong to. How about we just let Europe find its own way? Work together where we can, disagree where we have to, and stop treating it like a pawn on the chessboard.